Since it's such a nice day out today, I thought it'd be a perfect day to make a video on both of my running STIs. We have my 2007 Subaru Hawkeye STI in the garage, and then outside we have my 2017 STI. Now, a few days ago, we finally headed up to Josh's shop and got this Hawkeye tuned. I filmed an entire video, which I was actually very excited for, to find out that my mic was not working and the video did not have any audio. Quick update on what happened with tune day. It was a very successful tune day. It is the first dyno day I've had in a very, very long time that it went perfect. Now, this car is very, very stock. It's basic. I wasn't anticipating to run into any issues anyway, but you never know. I feel like almost every single time you have a car on the dyno, there's always a small issue you run into, but we did not run into any, which is very, very awesome. Modification wise, this car is very stock. It does have a Cobb intake with an NVIDIA catted high flow downpipe. That is the sum of all the modifications done to this car. Now, I didn't want any crazy moon tune, as one of you guys will be winning this car, so I wanted to make sure it was as reliable as possible. But with Josh being the wizard he is with tuning, we're still able to make a crazy amount of power in this car for it being stock. We ended up making, I think it was 291 wheel on the Mustang. So if you convert that to a dyno jet number, we made 330 wheel horsepower out of the stock STI. Way back when I was first modifying the VA STI, I had like the AEM 340 E85 pump, ID 1050s, and wastegate, but still on a stock turbo. On E85, we made 360. So that is crazy to see that this car with just an intake and downpipe made 330 when that car in E85 made 360. Obviously, the VA STI has come a very, very long way. It is in no way, shape, or form stock in any way. It is a crazy build now. So today I thought it would be fun to compare having a 1,000 horsepower build versus having a very basic bolt-on STI. So today, I thought I would go through with the pros and cons of having a stock build versus a full balls to the wall build. But since my shop is completely full, it's projects in there, I don't have a space to record. So first things first is we're gonna get both of these cars pulled out and go to a nice spot to record both of these cars next to each other. And since I'm just one person, I obviously can't drive both of these cars at the same time. So I'm actually gonna have the girl drive the Hawkeye while I drive the VA STI. Now this should be pretty funny. The girl does not really know how to drive manual well at all. The last time she drove manual was like 2 years ago. So it'll be very funny to try to see her drive this car. But you can't learn unless you practice, and I think this is the perfect car to practice on. I've always wanted her to try to drive my VA STI, but this car scares the crap out of her. I don't even think I've had her in this car since I have done this setup. So maybe today, if she feels comfortable enough driving this car, we can get her to drive the VA.
Fucking annoying.
Do you remember how to start it?
Yes, bitch.
You're sitting on the key.
What?
No, you can start it.
What am I doing wrong?
You're good. Reverse is a little intimidating for her, so I'm gonna go ahead and just back out the car for her, and all she has to do is put it in first gear.
This does not feel like first.
Clutch in?
Yes, but
Okay.
this does not feel like first.
Is the clutch all the way engaged?
Yeah.
Put it in neutral?
Is this not neutral? That's neutral.
That's neutral.
So what was it in first?
Yeah, that's first. Now handbrake down, or you can use the handbrake. No, you don't need it.
Now what? If I put it off the brake?
Rev it up and slowly let off the clutch. Wait, car coming. Okay, you're good.
Now what?
More. Keep revving it up and let off the clutch slowly. Let off the clutch more. More gas. There you go. There she goes. She got it first time. Good job. Behind me here are two of my STIs. This one is heavily modified, while this one is stock. Now this is what a stock STI engine bay looks like, with the exception of the aftermarket Cobb intake. Now this STI engine bay is anything but stock. It's crazy to think about that this engine bay not too long ago looked something like this. And I just actually realized that these cars are exactly 10 years apart. Although the motor has not changed much at all in these cars, the body has changed quite a bit. Now I get this question a lot, and that is people asking me if they should buy an older gen STI like the 06 and 07, or if they should make the jump to the 15 plus STI. I know a majority of you Subaru guys or Subaru enthusiasts are going to agree with me that the GD chassis, whether it's the Blobeye or the Hawkeye, are the best generation STIs they ever made. Now I agree looks wise that these cars look a ton better than the newer VA styles, but there's a couple factors that I personally consider when buying a car. Now it's genuinely tricky though, comparing the Hawkeye versus the VA. For me, I love a modernized interior. I like having the nice display, the comfortable seat, all stuff like that, which I think the VA does perfectly. These seats are absolutely amazing, extremely comfortable. From factory, you do have a nice head unit, and the interior is just way more modernized. So for me, that is a huge factor when I'm buying a car that I'll be dailying. But another thing for me is how raw is the car. That is something I absolutely love in a daily. I love raw power feeling cars, which I think the GD chassis by far surpasses the rawness of the VA STI. I feel like a problem with a lot of new cars is everything feels so controlled, smooth, linear, which is nice in most cases, but me personally, I love to have a raw feeling car. So that is why I absolutely love the GD chassis. But obviously, since this car is 10 years older than the VA STI, the interior is quite a bit more outdated, as you guys can see. Now I will say these seats are still extremely comfortable and I thoroughly enjoy sitting in them, but that is pretty much the only thing I like about the interior. But one thing I did do to this Hawkeye that makes it, in my opinion, way more daily friendly is installing this iDoing large head unit with wireless CarPlay. It modernizes this car so much where I can actually enjoy daily driving this car. So if you're willing to put a little bit of money into the Hawkeye STI to modernize the interior, I think the STI is a better, well-rounded car. Now for the main debate, should you keep your STI stock or should you go the route I did and heavily modify it? If you guys have followed this build for the last several months, you guys know that there's pretty much nothing left stock on this build. We have a complete custom rotated kit done by Ranch Built, custom modified ETS front mount, BBR full stage X long block. I mean, nothing is stock on this car short of the wiring harness and fuse box. Now this build specifically has a very large power rating. This car makes 1,000 horsepower. Now this car isn't the average built Subaru. It makes quite a bit more power than your day-to-day built Subaru that you'll see on the street. This car is sitting right at 1,000 wheel horsepower, which at that point, I would not say that this car is very daily friendly at all. Now there's a few things specifically that make this not the best daily driver. One, obviously right now we are sitting on slicks, which if you've ever driven a car on slicks, it is not the most comfortable driving car at all, especially if you're getting to higher speeds. But then also you have the drivability aspect of it as well. I am running the largest off-the-shelf ID 2600s that they offer. Now from my understanding, it's kind of tricky to tune a car with such a large injector and fuel system to be 100% perfect on the street. Josh now has done a fantastic job at making this car very, very close to stock driving on the street as possible. But when you have such a crazy build like this, you're gonna have to sacrifice some of that daily driverness. The sole purpose of this build was to go drag racing, so I had no real intention on driving on the street. And truthfully, I do not enjoy driving this car on the street. That's why, unfortunately, you guys have not seen a lot of videos of driving this car on the street. One, it's not worth the engine damage, wear and tear to beat this on the street when my intention is to go drag racing. So in my mind, it's not worth the risk. But also, like I've mentioned, the slicks make it not that comfortable. Also, I did go ahead and delete the hydraulic power steering pump. I did convert it to electronic rack, but I have not finished the wiring. So once that is wired in, I'll have the full power steering back on this car. But as it sits right now, no power steering. It's a heavy car on the slicks. It is not fun to drive. Now for this STI, like I've mentioned, and as you guys can see, this car is very stock with the exception of intake and downpipe. Now this car is an absolute blast to drive on the street. After I got it tuned with Josh, I have been driving it more and more, and I have not had so much fun in a car in a very long time. Now the nice thing with driving this car is you don't have a whole lot to worry about. You're not pushing a ton of power. You're not worried about taking out a motor. You could just go take this car on the street, beat on it here and now, and you're not having to worry about blowing it up. Now I'm not saying your car has to be stock to beat the crap out of it, enjoy it on a daily basis without it blowing up. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that there's a lot less worry when your car is stock. If this STI was my car and I was doing a build on it, I would do a rotated probably 6466, maybe even a 6870, put a nice built block in there, keep it pretty tame, make like 700-800 wheel. And I think that's pretty much, in my opinion, the cap of power that I would want to daily drive on the street. But truthfully, I've mentioned this many, many times in my previous videos. My favorite setup I've ever had on a Subaru and got to drive is when I had this car in its stock turbo placement with an FP Black AMS intake manifold. I was making right at 600 wheel, and I absolutely enjoyed that car. It was the best daily Subaru I've ever driven. Quick power, not too much power where you're always worried about blowing it up, and still able to go take it out on the weekends and have some fun. But then there's also the big factor, which is cost on doing a build. Obviously, this build costs a lot more than having an intake and downpipe. So that also plays a huge factor into it as well. But what I'm trying to say is you don't need to go out and spend all of this money to have like 1,000 horsepower build just to go have some fun on the street. I think, in my opinion, having a simple rotated turbo setup or even like an FP Black stock location turbo is the best bang for your buck for a daily driver. Now, obviously, this build is a little bit different from that. This is a purpose-built build. My intention is to go drag racing with this, make content for you guys, go to car shows and stuff like that. I've talked a little bit about the drivability of both of these cars, the built car, how it drives on the street, versus the stock-ish car drivability. So let's go ahead, I'll take you guys with me, and we are going to be driving each of the STIs and comparing the differences. car is way smoother than driving my VA STI. The clutch is butter soft, it drives super smooth. You're not listening to funny noises the whole. That was a very clean FD RX-7. Damn, I hope you guys saw that. But even in stock form, it makes like 330 right now. It is still an absolute blast to drive on the road. It's not the craziest car. It's not the craziest, fastest car on the road, but it's still a blast to drive. Now let's drive the full-blown race car. Now this car, you guys can already tell right off the bat, it's way more spacious, but also way more modernized. Right off the bat, you guys can already tell it is nothing like the stock form STI. Even just sitting at idle here, the car shakes so much. Granted, I do have solid mounts throughout the whole car, but that's something you kind of need to do at this power level. Feels like you always have to be consistently accelerating, which is fine because this is a purpose-built track. On the track, this car is an absolute blast. But driving it on the street is something I truly don't enjoy in this car. Now, to be fair, if I was on street tires and had power steering, I think it would make it a lot more enjoyable. But for me and a daily driver, I don't want to have to worry about having a heavy clutch, stuff like that. The other STI, the stockish form, you have no worries driving that car. It's very easy to drive and you can just go point A to B without issue. I understand that these are completely polar opposite builds. The Hawkeye being very much so in a stock form, just a basic stage 2 car, versus the VA STI, which is a gnarly 1,000 horsepower build. But if this car was my sole daily driver, I would pick the Hawkeye every single time over the VA STI. But if you have more than one car that is your daily driver, and you just want a fun weekend car, crazy looks, crazy power, I would then choose the VA STI in the build. But if you're someone young that's just getting into cars, building them, in my opinion, I do not think it is worth to build a car to the VA's extent as a daily driver. You're going to be driving that car way more worrying than actually just enjoying the car, getting inside and just going. So for that reason, I think a very stockish, doesn't have to be as stock as this with like a stage 2 package, even just like a turbo, injectors, stuff like that, but not to the escalation that I've taken the VA STI to. But in my opinion, you cannot beat just a basic stage 2 STI as your daily commuter. But like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this Hawkeye is actually going to be won by one of you guys. But the giveaway is currently live, so make sure to go ahead and check the link in the description to get yourself entered. I'm curious, if one of you guys were to win this car, what would your power plans be for it? Would you keep it as a nice stock daily, or would you go balls to the walls and make some power?